Good evening, traveler of the mind. Tonight, I invite you to rest along the edge of the world, where the land meets the sea, where civilizations rise, and where cultures have been shaped for thousands of years. Our topic is coastlines, those shifting, powerful, and mesmerizing boundaries that both protect and expose societies to the vast waters beyond. As you listen, let your breathing slow. Imagine the sound of gentle waves against a shore, the salt carried through the air, the soft pull of tides guiding you into calm. This is not only a geography lesson, it is a lullaby written by the earth itself. If you find this soothing, I invite you, only if you wish, to subscribe for more journeys like this one. You might also share in the comments your country, your city, and the time at which you are listening. These small details create a map of our own, a community of listeners scattered across continents, yet united in curiosity and calm. Now, let us begin. The first fact is simple, yet profound. More than 40% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of a coastline. This is not a coincidence, but the result of centuries of human adaptation. Coastlines offer access to food, water, trade, and migration routes. They are both gateways and guardians, shaping economies, politics, and even the psychology of people who live beside them. Consider the Mediterranean coast. For thousands of years, it has been the heart of maritime exchange, the cradle of commerce that connected ancient Egypt, Greece, Rome, and Carthage. Civilizations were not isolated. They were neighbors across the sea. The coastline was their bridge, not their barrier. This is why some historians call the Mediterranean the world's first highway. In contrast, the Pacific coastline of South America, with its towering Andes Mountains, offered a very different challenge. Here, the Inca civilization thrived not through shipping lanes, but through engineering, carving terraces and trails along rugged coastal cliffs. The coastline was not a gentle embrace, but a sharp edge, demanding ingenuity for survival. Coastlines also tell stories of erosion. Every wave that touches land reshapes it, slowly but relentlessly. The chalk cliffs of Dover in England, for example, are slowly receding, losing centimeters each year. To stand atop them is to look both at permanence and impermanence. Stone carved by ancient seas, yet destined to collapse back into the waters below. But coastlines also create abundance. Mangrove forests, tidal flats, and coral reefs thrive at these intersections of land and water. They are nurseries for fish, protectors against storms, and sources of livelihoods for millions. The Sundarbans of Bangladesh and India, for instance, are the largest mangrove forest in the world, home to Bengal tigers and countless other species. Here, coastlines are not only about trade, but about biodiversity, resilience, and survival. Tourism, too, is shaped by coastlines. Imagine the luxury beaches of the French Riviera, the white sands of the Maldives, or the dramatic fjords of Norway. These destinations drive economies, blending natural beauty with human desire for leisure and escape. In this sense, coastlines create culture, festivals, foods, and traditions born from the rhythm of the tides. As the night deepens, Think of how coastlines affect technology as well. Modern ports are marvels of logistics. Singapore, Rotterdam, Shanghai hubs where shipping containers flow like lifeblood for the global economy. The geometry of harbors, the depth of waters, and the proximity to land routes all shape whether a city becomes powerful or peripheral. The story of New York, for example, is inseparable from its coastline. The natural harbor provided shelter, while the Hudson River opened pathways into the interior. Ellis Island, once a small piece of land in this harbor, became a symbol of migration, opportunity, and the meeting point of countless cultures. Without its coastline, New York would not be the city we know today. And yet, coastlines are fragile. Rising sea levels threaten cities from Miami to Jakarta, reminding us that the same waters which sustain life can also reclaim land. Coastal defenses, seawalls, levees, and artificial islands represent humanity's attempts to negotiate with the sea, to push back against its timeless patience. Before we close this first chapter, consider how coastlines even shape language and imagination. The word liminal comes from the Latin limen, meaning threshold. Coastlines are liminal spaces, neither entirely land nor entirely sea, but both. They symbolize transition, possibility, and mystery. In myths and folklore across the world, from the sirens of Greece to the sea gods of Polynesia, coastlines are portals to the unknown. As you let your eyelids grow heavy, picture the coastline closest to you. Maybe it is rugged and cold, like the North Atlantic shores of Ireland. Maybe it is warm and sandy, like the Caribbean. Or maybe you live far inland and imagine, instead, a dream coast, somewhere you've always wanted to visit. Wherever it is, know that it connects you to every other listener, for we are all touched, directly or indirectly, by the shores of this world. This is the gentle power of coastlines. They are not just boundaries, they are beginnings. Let us step further into the past, where the first great civilizations discovered that to live beside the sea was to live with opportunity. As you settle more deeply into rest, imagine those early human communities building fires on the sand, watching the waves, and slowly realizing that the coast was not only a place of beauty, but a lifeline. One of the most remarkable coastal civilizations was ancient Egypt, though often remembered for the Nile. Its connection to the Mediterranean and the Red Sea cannot be overlooked. Ports like Alexandria became centers of culture, commerce, and learning. Ships brought luxury goods, spices, and knowledge. And so, Egypt was not only a river civilization, but a coastal one, looking outward to the world as much as inward to its fertile floodplains. The Phoenicians, too, made the sea their ally, emerging from the narrow coastal strip of what is today Lebanon. They built powerful city-states like Tyre and Sidon. These people were known as master traders, sailors, and shipbuilders. They sailed across the Mediterranean, spreading not only goods, but also their alphabet, one of the ancestors of modern writing. Their coastline was small in landmass, yet vast in influence. Greece offers another story. Surrounded by the Aegean, Ionian, and Mediterranean seas, its fractured coastline gave rise to city-states rather than a unified empire in its earliest days. Each city had access to the sea, and through it, they connected with each other, trading ideas, art, and philosophies. The coastline, with its countless harbors and islands, was a geographic blessing that made Greece a cultural lighthouse of the ancient world. Consider the role of coasts in Asia. In India, the Gujarat coast connected South Asia to Arabia and East Africa. The spice trade, silk trade, and exchange of knowledge were all funneled through ports like Lothal, an ancient Harappan city with one of the world's earliest known dockyards. Imagine wooden ships rocking gently in the tides, laden with beads, textiles, and exotic goods, all flowing through this coastal hub thousands of years ago. And across the sea, China's coastline was equally influential. The ancient port of Guangzhou, part of the Maritime Silk Road, linked East Asia with Southeast Asia, Africa, and even the Middle East. Porcelain, silk, and tea left these shores, while horses, spices, and new technologies arrived. Without coastlines, China's golden dynasties might have remained more isolated. With them, they became global participants in the story of trade and culture. Even the Americas tell similar tales. The Olmec and Maya civilizations made use of the Gulf of Mexico's coastlines for transport and exchange. Later, the Incas, though centered in the mountains, built extensive networks that touched the Pacific coast, ensuring that their empire was not cut off from the bounty of the sea. The Pacific provided fish, salt, and even communication through small coastal rafts. Coastlines, then, were not passive borders, they were teachers. They taught humans to build ships, to navigate, to understand winds and tides. They encouraged the spread of technologies like the compass, developed in China, and the astrolabe, used in the Islamic Golden Age. From Alexandria to Zanzibar, from Venice to Malacca, coastal ports became the engines of civilization, where luxury, technology, and ideas flowed freely. As you imagine these ancient coasts, you might picture the bustling harbors, the scent of spices, the shimmer of sunlight on water. But just as vivid are the quiet coasts, fishing villages, small communities that depended not on empire, but on the daily harvest of the sea. Here, the rhythm of tides dictated the rhythm of life. Nets were cast, boats pulled ashore, and stories told under the stars as waves whispered along the sand. Coasts were also places of myth and legend. The Greeks told stories of Poseidon, the god of the sea, whose trident could shake the earth. The Japanese believed in Reargen, a dragon king who ruled the ocean's depths. In Norse mythology, the sea was a place of both fear and wonder, filled with serpents and hidden realms. These myths reveal a truth. Humanity has always looked at the coastline as a threshold between safety and the unknown, between the familiar land and the mysterious waters beyond. And beyond myth, coastlines shaped military power. Naval battles often decided the fate of empires. The Athenians' dominance during the Golden Age came not only from philosophy and democracy, but also from their navy. Controlling sea routes, the British Empire, centuries later, would do the same, using its navy and its coastal harbors to extend influence across the globe. Without coastlines, there could be no maritime dominance, and without maritime dominance, global empires might never have risen. Yet, coastlines are fragile partners. Ancient cities sometimes flourished, then vanished as the sea advanced, or retreated. Heracleion, an Egyptian city once near the mouth of the Nile, sank beneath the waves, rediscovered only recently by divers. Its temples, statues, and inscriptions now lie submerged, reminding us of how easily coastlines can erase the traces of entire civilizations. This duality, coastlines as creators and destroyers, runs through human history. They give and they take away. They invite, but they also demand respect. And so, civilizations built rituals, technologies, and defenses to honor and manage this fragile balance. As you drift deeper into stillness, imagine yourself standing on a quiet shore at night. The stars above are mirrored in the water. You are both part of history and outside it, a witness to the timeless story of coastlines shaping the destiny of humankind. As the waves move steadily in your mind, let us shift from ancient harbors to the science of the coast itself. Coastlines are not static. They are living edges of the planet, changing with each tide, reshaped by the forces of nature in ways both gradual and sudden. Understanding these processes reveals why no shoreline looks the same, and why human life along them must adapt to constant change. Erosion is one of the most powerful sculptors of coastlines. Each wave that crashes against a cliff takes away a fragment of rock, carving arches, caves, and eventually stacks that stand isolated in the water. The famous 12 Apostles in Australia are a striking example of this, where limestone cliffs erode slowly into dramatic pillars. Erosion can happen quickly. 2. During storms, entire sections of coastline can collapse, reminding us of nature's sheer force. Deposition is the other side of the story. Just as waves take away, they also give. Beaches are born when sediments carried by rivers or ocean currents accumulate along the shore. The white sands of the Maldives, for example, are made of ground-up coral and shells. The black sands of Hawaii are formed from volcanic basalt, cooled and broken into grains by the relentless action of waves. Each beach is therefore a signature, a fingerprint of its geology and history. Currents are the hidden highways of the ocean. They move vast quantities of water, redistributing heat, nutrients, and sediments. The Gulf Stream, one of the most famous, carries warm water from the Gulf of Mexico across the Atlantic, influencing the climate of Europe. Without it, winters in northern Europe would be far harsher. Currents also influence human travel and trade. Ancient sailors learned to ride these natural highways, turning geography into opportunity. Tides add another rhythm to coastal life. They are driven by the gravitational pull of the moon and the sun, causing water levels to rise and fall twice each day. In places like the Bay of Fundy in Canada, tides can reach an astonishing height difference of more than 16 meters. Imagine standing on the shore and watching the sea retreat so far that the seabed becomes exposed, only to return hours later with unstoppable force. For centuries, communities here have timed fishing, farming, and shipping to this great natural clock. Coastlines also bear the scars of tectonic activity. Earthquakes and volcanic eruptions can reshape them in moments. In Japan, entire coastlines have shifted due to seismic events, altering bays and harbors. Volcanic islands like Iceland and Hawaii demonstrate how coastlines can grow rather than shrink, as lava cools and solidifies into new land. These processes are reminders that coastlines are never fixed, but always in transition. Sea level rise is a more modern challenge. As glaciers melt and oceans expand due to climate change, coastlines around the world are retreating. Low-lying nations like the Maldives and Kiribati face existential threats where entire communities may need to relocate. Cities like Miami, Jakarta, and Venice already battle flooding, with engineering projects underway to protect them. These challenges show how coastlines, while beautiful, require human resilience and adaptation. Yet, coastlines also create fertile ecosystems. Estuaries, where rivers meet the sea, are nurseries for fish, birds, and countless marine species. Mangrove forests protect shores from erosion, while also serving as carbon sinks, helping regulate the global climate. Coral reefs, often called the rainforests of the sea, shelter coastlines from storm surges and support one of the most diverse ecosystems on Earth. Imagine swimming above a reef where colors shimmer in every direction, and every tiny fish contributes to the delicate balance of the coastal world. Humans, too, shape coastlines. Dams alter river sediment flows, starving beaches of the sand they need. Coastal cities reclaim land from the sea, as seen in Dubai, Singapore, and the Netherlands. Artificial islands rise from shallow waters, monuments to engineering and ambition. Yet, these projects often come with consequences, changing tides, currents, and ecosystems in ways not always predicted. Coastlines are also vulnerable to extreme weather. Hurricanes, cyclones, and typhoons are born over warm waters, gathering energy and unleashing it upon shores. In 2005, Hurricane Katrina reshaped parts of the Gulf Coast in the United States. In 2004, the Indian Ocean tsunami devastated coastlines from Indonesia to East Africa, showing how in minutes entire communities could be swept away. These events remind us that the coast is a place of beauty, but also of risk. Despite the challenges, coastlines remain magnets for human settlement. Today, more than 40% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of the coast. People are drawn to the sea for its resources, its opportunities for trade, its beauty, and its role as a natural boundary. The coast is where agriculture meets fishing, where cities rise into global hubs, and where cultures blend through contact with travelers and merchants. So as you relax, picture the coast as a living edge, sometimes calm and inviting, sometimes violent and unpredictable, but always essential. Each grain of sand beneath your feet is part of a story millions of years in the making. Each tide is a reminder of the moon's quiet influence on Earth. Each wave is a whisper of the ocean's vast energy. In this delicate balance of erosion, deposition, tides, and tectonics lies the science of the coast. A story as old as the planet and as present as the wave you can almost hear in your imagination right now. Imagine a world before airplanes and high-speed trains, when oceans and seas were both barriers and highways. For thousands of years, coastlines have been the starting points of exploration, the crossroads of cultures, and the lifelines of commerce. Ports and harbors, those safe anchorages carved by nature or built by human ingenuity, are among the most important features of coastal geography. Without them, the exchange of goods, ideas, and cultures across continents would never have flourished the way it has. Let us begin in the ancient world. Alexandria, a coastal jewel of Egypt, became one of the busiest ports in the Mediterranean. Situated at the mouth of the Nile, it connected the riches of Africa to Greece, Rome, and beyond. Imagine ships laden with grain, papyrus, and gold sailing in, while vessels carrying olive oil, wine, and ceramics departed. The port was not only an economic hub, but a cultural one too. As scholars, traders, and travelers mingled in its markets and libraries. Another iconic port was Carthage, in present-day Tunisia. Its strategic coastal position made it the center of a maritime empire that rivaled Rome. The harbors of Carthage were engineering marvels. Vast, circular docks with space for hundreds of warships and merchant vessels. The city's prosperity was built upon its mastery of the sea, showing how coastlines could support entire civilizations. Moving east, we find Guangzhou in China, also known as Canton. During the Tang and Song dynasties, it was one of the busiest ports on Earth. It connected China with Southeast Asia, India, the Middle East, and Africa through the Maritime Silk Road. Spices, porcelain, silk, and precious stones passed through its docks, enriching both China and the distant lands that received its goods. The city thrived because of its coastal access, linking river trade inland to oceanic routes abroad. The age of exploration reshaped ports yet again. Lisbon in Portugal became the launchpad for expeditions that reached Africa, India, and the Americas. Seville in Spain thrived as the entry point of silver and gold from the New World. Amsterdam grew into a maritime powerhouse, with ships carrying spices from the East Indies and timber from the Baltic. The wealth of these coastal cities transformed them into cultural capitals filled with art, architecture, and innovation. Even natural harbors influenced history. Hong Kong, for example, has one of the deepest natural harbors in the world. This geographic advantage made it a pivotal center of trade during the colonial period and continues to make it one of the busiest ports today. Similarly, New York Harbor, with its wide estuary and protected bays, became a gateway for immigrants arriving in the United States, carrying hopes and dreams alongside cargo. Ports are not just economic nodes. They are cultural melting pots. The coastal city of Zanzibar, on the eastern shore of Africa, became a hub of the spice trade. Here, Arabic, Indian, African, and European influences blended, creating a unique cultural identity still visible in its architecture and traditions. In Venice, canals lined with palaces spoke of the immense wealth brought by maritime trade. Sailors from across the Mediterranean shared stories, songs, and beliefs, weaving a rich tapestry of cultural exchange. But ports also revealed the vulnerability of coastlines. As trade intensified, so did conflicts. Naval battles often centered around control of harbors. Coastal fortresses rose as guardians of these vital spaces. The British Empire, for example, established a network of strategic ports around the world, from Gibraltar to Singapore, ensuring that trade routes remained under its influence. Whoever controlled the ports controlled the flow of goods and wealth. Today, the importance of ports is greater than ever. Modern superports like Shanghai, Singapore, and Rotterdam handle millions of containers every year. Standing at one of these vast container terminals, one might see cranes moving ceaselessly, stacking metal boxes destined for every corner of the globe. It is the modern equivalent of the bustling harbors of Alexandria or Amsterdam, only on a scale far larger than ancient traders could have imagined. Yet ports are more than commerce. They are cultural gateways. Think of Marseille in France, where African, European, and Middle Eastern influences meet. Or Rio de Janeiro, where Portuguese colonial heritage blended with African and indigenous cultures arriving through maritime links. Each port city is like a mosaic, with each wave of traders and travelers leaving a lasting imprint. Ports also embody resilience. When tsunamis, hurricanes, or floods strike, harbors often suffer the most damage. Rebuilding them is a monumental effort, yet they are always restored, because without them, life along the coast would wither. They are the heartbeat of coastal economies, the reason why cities rise along shores instead of inland. Even in luxury and tourism, ports hold significance. Cruise ships dock in harbors from the Caribbean to the Mediterranean, carrying visitors seeking sun, history, and culture. Ports, once filled with spices and silk, now welcome travelers with cameras and curiosity. The coast has always been a place of exchange. Today, it is an exchange of experiences and cultures as much as goods. As you drift with these thoughts, picture the coast as more than a line on a map. Imagine it as a stage where history, trade, and culture all converge. Ports are the doors to the world, where ships carry not just commodities, but also human hopes and ambitions. Each harbor light that glimmers at night is a beacon of centuries of connection between land and sea. And so, in the gentle rhythm of waves and trade winds, we see how coastlines gave birth to ports, and ports gave birth to the modern world. They remain, even today, the anchors of civilization at the meeting point of earth and ocean. As we move further along our exploration of coastlines, let us pause at one of the most fascinating and often misunderstood aspects of coastal geography: erosion. When most people think of the shoreline, they imagine permanence, a beach they return to year after year, or cliffs standing tall for centuries. Yet, in truth, coastlines are some of the most dynamic and restless places on Earth. They shift, reshape, and sometimes vanish before our very eyes, sculpted endlessly by wind, waves, and tides. Coastal erosion is the process by which land is worn away by the forces of water. Waves crash, tides pull, winds blow, and storms surge. Grain by grain, rock by rock, cliffs crumble, and beaches migrate. What makes erosion so captivating is not only the natural artistry it creates, but also the profound way it influences human life. Take the white cliffs of Dover in England. These chalk cliffs have stood as a symbol of resilience for centuries. Yet they are slowly retreating under the assault of waves and rain. Their gleaming white face is actually a record of millions of years of marine fossils, compressed into fragile limestone that now fractures under the constant rhythm of the sea. To stand at their edge is to see both permanence and impermanence side by side, majestic cliffs, yet destined to erode. In the United States, Cape Cod in Massachusetts tells another story. The sandy peninsula has been shaped, eroded, and rebuilt over thousands of years by Atlantic storms. The beaches migrate, the dunes shift, and even lighthouses have had to be moved inland to escape the advancing sea. The Cape is a living demonstration of the power of coastal erosion, where landscapes are rewritten within a single lifetime. Sometimes erosion reveals hidden treasures. In the cliffs of Normandy, France, natural arches and dramatic sea stacks have been carved by centuries of wave action. At Etretat, slender rock spires rise dramatically from the water, as if nature sculpted monuments to time itself. Tourists travel from around the world to witness these fragile masterpieces, reminders that destruction and beauty often go hand in hand. Elsewhere, erosion becomes a threat. The Maldives, a nation of coral atolls in the Indian Ocean, faces the sobering prospect of rising seas combined with wave-driven erosion. Its beaches, beloved by luxury travelers and essential to local culture, are being eaten away. In Bangladesh, millions live on low-lying coastal plains, where the encroaching Bay of Bengal claims farmland and villages. These shifting shores are not just scientific curiosities. They are human challenges that affect economies, homes, and lives. It is not always loss, however. Coastal erosion can also create new landforms. Barrier islands along the southeastern United States, such as the Outer Banks of North Carolina, were formed by the long, slow movement of sand along the shoreline. These islands protect the mainland from storms, acting as a first line of defense while also creating unique habitats for birds, turtles, and marine life. The Netherlands provides another story of human response to erosion. Much of the country lies below sea level and without its iconic dikes, dunes, and seawalls. Erosion would have swallowed entire regions. The Dutch have spent centuries battling the sea, turning their coastline into a place where engineering and nature exist in delicate balance. Today, projects like the sand motor, an artificial peninsula created to allow natural currents to redistribute sand, show how innovation can work with, rather than against, erosion. Cultural heritage also sits precariously at the edge of eroding coasts. Think of ancient temples in southern India, such as those at Mahabalipuram, where centuries of waves have carved away rock faces once filled with intricate detail. Or the lost villages of Britain, like Dunwich, a medieval town that once rivaled London in size, but now lies beneath the North Sea, its ruins occasionally revealed by storms. Each eroding coast whispers of human stories slowly swallowed by the tides. Even in places of tourism and luxury, erosion reshapes the experience. Beachfront resorts in the Caribbean or Pacific Islands often spend millions replenishing sand lost to waves, bringing in barges of fresh sand to maintain the idyllic shoreline that travelers expect. Coastal erosion, then, is not only a natural process, but also an economic concern, shaping industries like tourism, real estate, and even insurance. Nature, however, remains the ultimate sculptor. Fjords in Norway, though not created by waves, but by ancient glaciers, reveal how erosion, in this case ice carving into stone, can create some of the most breathtaking coastlines in the world. These narrow, steep-walled valleys filled with seawater remind us that erosion comes in many forms: water, wind, ice, and even human activity. The coastlines we see today are merely temporary. A beach you walk on now may look entirely different in a decade. A cliff admired by generations may collapse in a single storm. The ever-changing nature of erosion is what makes coastlines both fragile and eternal. Fragile in form, but eternal in the cycle of change. As you let these images drift in your mind, imagine the waves at night, endlessly shaping and reshaping the edges of continents. There is a strange comfort in knowing that even the strongest cliffs eventually yield to the sea, and that, from their loss, new forms are born. Coastlines are alive, always in motion, always whispering the story of time. When we think of coastlines, we often picture natural beauty, beaches, cliffs, lagoons. Yet some of the most fascinating coastal stories are not natural, but human. For thousands of years, great civilizations have grown where the land meets the sea. The coast is a frontier, a gateway for travel, commerce, and culture. Many of the world's most famous cities owe their very existence to the geography of their shoreline. Take Tokyo, Japan. Today, it is the world's largest metropolitan area, home to more than 37 million people. But its growth has always been tied to its coastal position on Tokyo Bay. Centuries ago, it was a fishing village. By the time it became Edo, the political heart of the Tokugawa shogunate, its harbor was the artery that brought rice, fish, and timber into the city. Today, Tokyo Bay remains one of the busiest shipping routes in Asia, a hub for technology, finance, and tourism alike. Further west lies Shanghai, China. Its coastal placement on the East China Sea and the Yangtze River Delta made it a trading port centuries before it became a global financial capital. The Bund, Shanghai's historic waterfront, stands as a living museum of its maritime history, lined with European colonial architecture that reflects its role in international trade. Today, the port of Shanghai is the busiest in the world, moving more cargo than any other. Here, we see the economy of a modern nation intertwined with its shoreline. Travel south to Singapore, and we find another story of how the coast shapes identity. This small island nation lacks natural resources, but commands one of the most strategic coastlines in the world. Sitting at the crossroads of the Indian and Pacific Oceans, Singapore grew into a global trade hub. Its shipping lanes carry a significant portion of the world's oil, electronics, and consumer goods. Tourism thrives on its coastal luxury, with marinas, waterfront gardens, and cultural landmarks drawing millions each year. Singapore is proof that coastal geography can define a nation's destiny. Europe offers its own maritime gems. Venice, Italy, built upon islands in a lagoon, is perhaps the most romantic coastal city of all. Its canals, bridges, and marble palaces are not only architectural marvels, but also reminders of Venice's power as a maritime republic. For centuries, Venetian merchants controlled trade routes linking Europe with Asia. Spices, silk, and art pass through its docks, enriching the city with luxury and culture. Today, rising seas and erosion threaten Venice, but its legacy as a coastal empire endures. London, too, rose because of its relationship with water. While not directly on the sea, the Thames River connected it to the coast, making it a vital port. Maritime trade fueled its rise into one of the world's great capitals. The London docklands once buzzed with ships, bringing in goods from every corner of the British Empire. Though the docks have since transformed into modern financial districts, the city's story is inseparable from its coastal geography. Across the Atlantic, New York City mirrors this theme. Situated on a deep, natural harbor where the Hudson River meets the Atlantic, New York became the entry point for millions of immigrants. Ellis Island and the Statue of Liberty still stand as symbols of this history. And even today, its coastal infrastructure supports global trade. The glittering skyline of Manhattan would not exist without the harbor that first allowed the city to flourish. In Africa, coastal cities like Lagos, Nigeria, demonstrate the power of coastlines in the modern era. Lagos began as a fishing and trading settlement on the coast, but today it is one of the fastest-growing megacities in the world. Its Atlantic shoreline makes it a hub for trade, oil, and culture. Despite challenges like congestion and flooding, Lagos embodies how coastal access drives urban growth. South America, too, has cities defined by their shores. Rio de Janeiro is famous for its beaches, Copacabana and Ipanema, where mountains tumble directly into the sea. Yet Rio's coastline has been more than a tourist postcard. It made the city a vital port for Brazil's colonial exports of sugar and coffee. Today, tourism remains central, blending natural beauty, cultural vibrancy, and coastal geography. Cape Town, South Africa, adds another story of beauty and strategy. Nestled between the Atlantic Ocean and Table Mountain, Cape Town began as a supply station for ships traveling between Europe and Asia. Its harbor made it a linchpin of maritime trade. Today, it is both a tourist jewel and a city grappling with the challenges of water scarcity and rising seas. Each of these cities illustrates the same truth. Coastlines are not just edges of continents. They have allowed ideas, goods, and people to flow across oceans. They are where cultures meet, economies grow, and civilizations flourish. Even now, modern economies rely heavily on coastlines. Roughly 40% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of a coast. Ports are the arteries of globalization, moving luxury goods, raw materials, and energy resources. Tourism thrives along coastlines, from luxury resorts to historic harbors. Technology and innovation often cluster in coastal cities, where international connections are strongest. And yet, these same coastlines are fragile. Rising sea levels threaten urban skylines, and storms test the resilience of coastal infrastructure. As the tides shift, humanity continues to adapt, building barriers, redesigning ports, and sometimes retreating. The legacies of coastal cities remind us that the sea has always been more than a horizon. It is a partner in human progress. To walk through Venice, Singapore, New York, or Rio is to walk along the very edge of human history, where civilization has always leaned toward the water. drawn to the mystery and promise of the sea. As you let these images drift in your mind, picture glowing harbors at night, reflections of city lights shimmering on calm waters, reminding us that coastlines are as much about people as they are about waves. When we stand at the edge of the land, looking out at the ocean, it is easy to feel that coastlines are permanent. Rocky cliffs appear timeless, and sandy beaches stretch on as if they will always be there. But coastlines are among the most dynamic landscapes on Earth. They are constantly shaped, shifted, and redefined by the forces of nature, by wind, waves, tides, and currents. Erosion is perhaps the most famous sculptor of coastlines. Every crashing wave is a chisel, slowly carving cliffs and reshaping bays. The white cliffs of Dover in England, brilliant chalk faces rising above the English Channel, are iconic examples. They seem mighty and eternal, but they retreat by centimeters each year. Storm surges and sea spray wear them down, meaning that the cliffs we admire today are already different from those seen centuries ago. In some places, the sea takes land away. In others, it builds new landscapes. Sediment carried by rivers often meets the sea at deltas where sand, silt, and clay spread outward to create fertile plains. The Nile Delta in Egypt, the Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta in Bangladesh, and the Mississippi Delta in the United States are all shaped by this process. These coastlines support millions of people with agriculture, fishing, and trade, proving that the natural work of rivers and tides is also a foundation of human civilization. Volcanoes add another dimension. Many islands and coastal lands exist only because of volcanic activity beneath the sea. Hawaii's black sand beaches remind us that the ocean floor itself can rise, creating entirely new coastlines over centuries. Iceland, straddling the mid-Atlantic ridge, constantly changes as lava meets seawater, hardening into new coastal forms. Volcanic coastlines carry a dual nature, destructive and creative. They can erase harbors in a single eruption, yet gift humanity fertile soils and spectacular beauty. Tides also play their part in shaping the shore. The Bay of Fundy in Canada is famous for having the highest tides in the world, with water levels rising and falling by up to 16 meters twice each day. Imagine standing at a fishing dock in the morning and seeing boats resting on the mud, only to return in the afternoon and find them floating high on deep waters. Such tidal extremes sculpt coastal ecosystems, exposing mudflats that feed birds and sea life, then covering them again under waves. Currents and longshore drift work more slowly, but their impact is enormous. They move sand along coasts, creating spits, barrier islands, and lagoons. The Outer Banks of North Carolina are narrow barrier islands that constantly shift under the push of currents and storms. To live there is to live with impermanence as residents adapt to an ever-changing coastline. Yet, these same processes create new habitats for wildlife and new landscapes for humans to explore. Storms, too, are powerful artists of the coast. Hurricanes and typhoons can redraw shorelines overnight. Beaches erode, dunes collapse, and new inlets open. For people living along coasts, these storms are a reminder that the sea is never fully tamed. Economies cultures, and technologies must all adapt to these realities. Coastal engineering, from seawalls to artificial reefs, has become a field of innovation, blending science and resilience with the hope of protecting both people and nature. But perhaps the most fascinating fact is that coastlines are not fixed lines at all. Geographers often note that if you measure a coastline with increasing detail, the length keeps changing. This is known as the coastline paradox. At large scales, a coastline may seem straightforward, but zoom in to every bay, inlet, and rock, and the line stretches longer and longer. In fact, in a mathematical sense, a coastline has no exact length. It depends on the scale of measurement. This paradox reveals the fractal nature of coastlines, where patterns repeat at different levels of detail, much like snowflakes or tree branches. All of these natural forces make coastlines places of endless change. Some changes are slow, measured in centuries. Others come suddenly with a storm or earthquake. Yet together, they remind us that the boundary between land and sea is alive, constantly redrawn. For travelers, this dynamism creates landscapes of wonder. Towering cliffs, smooth beaches, winding estuaries, volcanic arcs, and coral-fringed lagoons all exist because nature is always at work. For cultures and economies, it means adaptation, creativity, and resilience. When we relax by the shore, listening to the rhythmic pull of the tide, we are also hearing the pulse of geological time. Each wave is a reminder of how coastlines have shifted for millions of years, and how they will continue to evolve long after us. As you drift with these thoughts, imagine coastlines not as fixed borders, but as living frontiers. The sea comes and goes, carving, creating, reshaping. And in that dance, humanity has always found both challenge and inspiration. From the very dawn of human history, coastlines have been more than just boundaries of land and sea. They have been stages where civilizations rise, trade flourishes, and cultures mingle. The pull of the coast is magnetic. Wherever the shoreline meets calm waters, people have been drawn to settle, build, and dream. Take the Mediterranean, often called the cradle of civilization. Its coastline hosted some of the greatest cultures in human history. Ancient Egypt thrived along the Nile Delta, connecting inland agriculture with Mediterranean trade. The Greeks spread across countless islands and peninsulas, developed a maritime culture that carried philosophy, art, and democracy across the waters. Later, the Roman Empire relied heavily on its ports, stretching from Spain to the Levant, turning the Mediterranean into what they proudly named Mare Nostrum, RC. Each bay and harbor became a link in a network of commerce, culture, and power. The Indian Ocean coastlines tell a similar story of global connection. Long before Europeans began exploring, sailors from Arabia, East Africa, and South Asia navigated its waters, carried by the monsoon winds. Ports like Zanzibar, Malacca, and Calicut became cosmopolitan hubs where spices, ivory, textiles, and knowledge flowed. The rhythm of trade across these coasts shaped the economies and cultures of entire continents, weaving them into a maritime tapestry. In East Asia, the coastline of China gave rise to some of the busiest ports in the world. Shanghai and Guangzhou were not only centers of commerce, but gateways where cultures met and exchanged. Even earlier, coastal regions such as Fujian launched seafaring expeditions that connected China with Southeast Asia and beyond. Japan, too, owes much of its identity to its coasts, where fishing villages grew into global cities like Tokyo and Yokohama. Surrounded by sea, Japan's culture, cuisine, and economy are deeply tied to its shores. Across the Atlantic, the coastlines of Europe set the stage for the age of exploration. Portugal and Spain, perched on the Iberian Peninsula, used their coasts as springboards to sail into the unknown. From Lisbon, Vasco da Gama ventured around Africa to India, while from Seville, expeditions crossed the Atlantic to the Americas. These voyages reshaped world history, spreading cultures, technologies, and economies along new coastal frontiers. In the Americas, coastlines played an equally vital role. New York City rose on the edge of a natural harbor, making it a magnet for immigration, trade, and finance. Rio de Janeiro, framed by mountains and beaches, became both a cultural capital and a thriving port. The Pacific coast of California transformed from small settlements into global centers of technology and tourism, proving that coastlines can shape not only commerce, but entire identities. Even today, most of the world's great cities are coastal. Tokyo, Mumbai, Lagos, Los Angeles, Istanbul, and Sydney all thrive because they sit where sea meets land. Their coastlines allow for global trade, fishing industries, tourism, and cultural exchange. Airports and shipping ports link them to the wider world, while their beaches, promenades, and waterfronts make them centers of leisure and luxury. But coastlines are not just about commerce. They shape the very way people think, live, and believe. For the Polynesians, whose culture is spread across the Pacific, the sea was not a barrier, but a bridge. Guided by stars and waves, they connected islands scattered over thousands of kilometers. Their coastal settlements grew from a deep knowledge of the ocean and its rhythms, making them some of the greatest navigators in history. For northern cultures, coastlines often symbolized resilience. The Vikings of Scandinavia built longships that carried them along fjords and across rough seas, shaping not only their own history, but that of Europe. In Greenland, Iceland, and beyond, coastal survival meant learning to live in balance with harsh climates, fishing grounds, and seasonal migrations of animals. Religious and spiritual traditions, too, often find expression along coastlines. Many ancient temples in Greece, India, and Japan were built overlooking the sea, as if acknowledging the divine power of the waters. Coastal shrines became places of pilgrimage, where the horizon itself symbolized journeys into the unknown. In modern times, coastlines continue to inspire. They host luxury resorts where travelers seek relaxation by turquoise waters. They are places where economies thrive through tourism, fishing, and shipping. They are also centers of education and science, where universities and marine institutes study the delicate balance of ecosystems. Yet, for all this development, coastlines remain vulnerable. Rising sea levels, driven by climate change, threaten low-lying cities like Miami, Jakarta, and Dhaka. Coastal erosion, once a slow natural process, accelerates under human influence. Entire communities face the challenge of relocation or adaptation. The story of coastlines and human civilizations, therefore, is not just one of prosperity, but also of resilience in the face of change. As you reflect on these patterns, notice how coastlines have always served as thresholds. They are places of arrival and departure, of meeting and mingling, of growth and challenge. Whether in ancient deltas or modern skyscraper harbors, the shore remains the point where civilizations look outward, to trade, to explore, to dream. And so, as the waves continue to lap against ports and beaches, they remind us of centuries of human endeavor. The sound of the sea is not only natural music, but also the echo of history, of ships setting sail, of cities rising, of cultures interwoven by the endless dance of land and water. When you look at a world map, you can almost trace the flow of history simply by following the coastlines. Shores are more than just boundaries. They are power lines of trade, wealth, and influence, from ancient times until today. The rise and fall of great empires has often depended on how well they controlled their coasts and the seas beyond. Consider Venice, a city that seemed almost impossible to build. Rising from the marshy waters of the Adriatic Sea, its foundations rested on wooden piles driven into mud. Yet Venice transformed its coastline into a maritime empire. By dominating trade routes that passed between Europe and the East, Venice grew fabulously wealthy. Its merchants brought back spices, silk, and precious goods, turning the city into one of the most luxurious centers of the Renaissance. Its coastline, narrow, fragile, yet perfectly positioned, was the secret to its prosperity. On the other side of Europe, the British Isles developed their own coastal advantage. The United Kingdom's power grew from its navy, which could project influence across oceans. London's Thames estuary became a launchpad for global exploration and trade. Ports like Liverpool and Glasgow connected the British economy to the Americas, Asia, and Africa. By mastering its coastlines, Britain extended its reach to every continent, giving rise to an empire that reshaped world history. But coastlines also invite competition. The Caribbean, for example, became a stage of constant conflict during the colonial era. Spain, France, Britain, and the Netherlands fought for control of small islands, not for their size, but for their harbors and coastal fortresses. Whoever controlled the Caribbean coastlines could dominate sugar, rum, and trade routes across the Atlantic. Even today, the Caribbean's coasts remain central to tourism, culture, and global travel. Farther east, the coastlines of the Indian subcontinent reveal another layer of importance. India's western shores, with ports like Mumbai and Kochi, and its eastern shores with Chennai and Kolkata, made it a magnet for trade long before European powers arrived. These coasts were gateways where merchants from Arabia, Africa, and Southeast Asia brought their goods. Later, the British East India Company exploited these same ports, using them as anchors for economic and political dominance. Once again, coastlines determined the flow of power. In East Asia, the Yangtze River meets the East China Sea near Shanghai. That city's coastal position allowed it to grow into a global financial capital. Japan's coastline, fragmented into bays and harbors, gave rise to fishing villages that evolved into massive ports like Yokohama. Meanwhile, Singapore, though small in land area, thrives because it sits at the edge of the Malacca Strait, one of the busiest coastal trade routes in the world. Ships from all corners of the globe pass through this narrow stretch of water, making Singapore's coastline among the most strategic on Earth. Coastlines also play a central role in modern luxury and tourism economies. Think of the French Riviera, where Mediterranean beaches have become synonymous with wealth and glamour. Or Dubai, which has reshaped its Persian Gulf shoreline with artificial islands and luxury resorts. These coasts do not just connect people for trade. They attract travelers, investors, and dreamers. The tourism economy along coasts is one of the most profitable industries in the world, drawing millions to beaches, ports, and oceanfront cities. And yet, coastlines have another, quieter role. They are places of education and science. Marine institutes study the mysteries of coral reefs, tidal ecosystems, and coastal erosion. Universities near coasts often lead research in climate change, oceanography, and environmental technology. Here, knowledge flows along the shore just as much as goods and travelers do. The power of coastlines extends to geopolitics even today. Nations guard their coastal waters with navies, monitor shipping lanes with satellites, and establish exclusive economic zones stretching 200 nautical miles from their shores. These zones give countries rights over fishing, minerals, and energy resources, making coastlines essential to national security and prosperity. But with great importance comes great vulnerability. Coastlines face challenges from rising sea levels, more intense storms, and the pressures of urban development. Cities like New Orleans, Venice, and Bangkok struggle to defend their coasts with engineering marvels such as levees and seawalls. The Netherlands, famous for reclaiming land from the sea, demonstrates how human ingenuity can preserve coastlines, but also how delicate the balance remains. Through it all, coastlines remain symbols of connection. They are places where cultures encounter each other, where food traditions like sushi, paella, or ceviche are born from the meeting of land and sea. They are places of leisure, where families gather by the water's edge, and of work, where fishermen, sailors, and traders continue traditions stretching back millennia. The story of coastlines is the story of humanity itself. Our desire to explore, to connect, to grow, and to thrive. As tides rise and fall, as waves crash against cliffs and roll gently onto sandy beaches, the coast continues to shape who we are and where we are going. When we think of coastlines, it is easy to picture only the sandy beaches where waves lap gently against the shore. But the truth is, coastlines are some of the most diverse and vital ecosystems on our planet. They are living borders where land and ocean interact in endlessly fascinating ways. Every bay, delta, and cliff tells a story not only of geology, but of the intricate life that thrives in these margins. One of the most spectacular examples of coastal ecosystems is the coral reef. Coral reefs form along warm, shallow coastlines, and they are often referred to as the rainforests of the sea. The Great Barrier Reef in Australia, the largest living structure on Earth, stretches for over 2,300 kilometers along the Queensland coast. From space, it is visible like a luminous scar of turquoise and green across the Pacific. Coral reefs protect coastlines from storms by acting as natural barriers, absorbing wave energy. At the same time, they host millions of species: fish, crustaceans, sea turtles, and even birds that depend on reef life for survival. Tourism linked to coral reefs generates billions of dollars each year, making them not only natural wonders, but also key economic treasures. Another remarkable coastal formation is the mangrove forest. Found along tropical and subtropical shores, mangroves are unique trees that grow directly out of salty water. Their roots create dense, tangled networks that provide safe nurseries for fish and shellfish. They also act as carbon sinks, pulling greenhouse gases out of the atmosphere at rates higher than many terrestrial forests. Countries like Indonesia, Brazil, and Bangladesh rely heavily on mangroves as shields against hurricanes and rising tides. Yet, these fragile forests are threatened by urban expansion and shrimp farming, reminding us of the delicate balance between economy and environment. Moving into colder regions, coastlines offer equally stunning natural marvels. Along the coasts of Alaska, Norway, and Iceland, you can find dramatic fjords, deep, narrow inlets carved by glaciers during the Ice Age. These fjords, with towering cliffs rising directly out of icy waters, are some of the most awe-inspiring landscapes on Earth. They also serve as habitats for whales, seals, and seabirds. Tourism in these forward regions contributes heavily to local economies, attracting travelers who come to witness both their beauty and their serene atmosphere. Coastlines are also the birthplace of river deltas. The Nile Delta in Egypt, the Ganges-Brahmaputra Delta in Bangladesh, and the Mississippi Delta in the United States are fertile zones where rivers meet the sea. For thousands of years, deltas have supported agriculture by providing nutrient-rich soils. Civilizations have risen and thrived along these coastal plains, turning them into cradles of culture and trade. Yet deltas are also among the most vulnerable landscapes, as they are extremely sensitive to rising sea levels and coastal erosion. The biodiversity along coastlines cannot be overstated. Seabird colonies nest on cliffs, with species like puffins, albatrosses, and gulls depending entirely on coastal ecosystems. Sea turtles return year after year to sandy beaches, guided by instincts refined over millions of years. Even crabs perform remarkable migrations from coast to inland forests. Every living creature along the coast plays a role in this great natural orchestra. Beyond ecology, coastlines influence human well-being in subtle, profound ways. Studies have shown that people living near the coast often report lower levels of stress and higher levels of happiness. The rhythm of waves, the salty air, and the wide horizons create a natural sense of calm. That is why so many people flock to beaches for relaxation, healing, and spiritual connection. The coastline, in this sense, is not only an economic engine and ecological wonder, but also a place of refuge for the human spirit. The luxury travel industry has long recognized this. Coastal resorts in places like the Maldives, Bora Bora, and the Seychelles market, not just sun and sand, but an escape into serenity. Overwater villas, infinity pools overlooking turquoise lagoons, and spa retreats nestled in coastal cliffs sell an experience of ultimate relaxation. These economies thrive by blending the natural beauty of the coastline with the modern desire for luxury and exclusivity. But with this prosperity comes responsibility. Many coastal regions now face the double challenge of maintaining tourism while protecting fragile ecosystems. Beach erosion caused by construction, pollution from cruise ships, and coral bleaching from warming oceans threaten the very environments that attract visitors. Education and technology play key roles in addressing these issues. Coastal monitoring systems, sustainable tourism models, and renewable energy projects like offshore wind farms all represent attempts to harmonize human activity with the needs of the shore. Even as challenges loom, coastlines continue to inspire. Artists, writers, and musicians have found endless inspiration in the meeting of land and sea. The coastline is a threshold, a space of transition that mirrors the movement of life itself. From Homer's Odyssey to modern travel literature, the shore has symbolized adventure, longing, and transformation. Standing at the edge of the ocean, we are reminded of both our smallness and our vast potential. The coastline is alive. It grows, shifts, and breathes. Sand drifts, cliffs crumble, reefs rise and fall with the tides. The coastline is never fixed, and that is its true beauty. It teaches us resilience, adaptation, and a constant renewal of life. For as long as humanity has built societies, coastlines have acted as the great gateways to wealth, power, and cultural exchange. To stand on the shore is to stand at a threshold, not just between land and water, but between civilizations. Long before the invention of airplanes or modern highways, the sea was the most efficient and often the only way to connect distant peoples. The natural harbors carved into coastlines became the birthplaces of trade, of empires, and of global exchange. Consider the Mediterranean Sea, often called the cradle of Western civilization. The coastlines of Greece, Italy, and Egypt became interconnected hubs of commerce. Ancient ports like Piraeus, near Athens, Carthage, in modern-day Tunisia, and Alexandria in Egypt were bustling with ships loaded with olive oil, grain, wine, and textiles. These ports made possible the exchange not only of goods, but also of ideas, philosophies, and technologies. Without coastlines acting as bridges between cultures, the rich tapestry of Mediterranean civilization would never have taken shape. Farther east, the Indian Ocean became another highway of connection. The coastlines of India, East Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula were linked through monsoon-driven trade. Merchants from Gujarat or Calicut timed their voyages with seasonal winds, ensuring predictable routes to Zanzibar, Oman, and beyond. Along these coasts, entire cities thrived on maritime trade, becoming prosperous centers of luxury goods. Ivory, spices, gold, and even enslaved peoples moved along these shores. Swahili culture itself grew from the mingling of African, Arab, and Persian influences, made possible by coastal geography. China, too, offers a powerful example of coastline-driven wealth. The port of Guangzhou was one of the earliest international trade hubs, eventually linking into the great maritime Silk Road. By the 15th century, massive treasure fleets under Admiral Zhang, he sailed from Chinese coasts. projecting the empire's influence across Southeast Asia and into the Indian Ocean. Coastal cities like Shanghai would eventually grow into megacities, showcasing how geography fuels long-term economic power. Today, China's eastern seaboard remains the heart of its economy, where global shipping routes converge and drive industrial growth. In Europe's later history, coastlines allowed small nations to transform into global empires. Portugal, with its Atlantic coast, launched explorers like Vasco da Gama, who sailed around Africa to reach India. Spain's coastal position enabled the voyages of Columbus, which redefined global trade forever. And Britain, an island with abundant harbors, built a navy that dominated world commerce for centuries. Each of these cases reveals how coastlines, combined with maritime innovation, shaped the trajectory of entire nations. Modern coastlines remain the foundation of global trade. Today, over 80% of international goods by volume travel by sea, entering and leaving ports along coastlines. Ports like Shanghai, Singapore, and Rotterdam rank among the busiest in the world, moving millions of containers each year. The container itself, a modern invention, revolutionized trade and turned coastlines into high-tech gateways of globalization. When we see cranes lifting colorful containers onto ships, we are witnessing the modern version of what ancient traders once did with sacks of spices or barrels of wine. The economic importance of coastlines goes beyond just ports. Tourism along coastlines is one of the fastest growing sectors of the global economy. Beaches in Thailand, Spain, Mexico, and the Caribbean draw millions of visitors, generating billions of dollars annually. Coastal cities often command high property values as luxury buyers compete for views of the sea. The Riviera in France, the Amalfi Coast in Italy, or the Hamptons in the United States show how coastlines have become synonymous with wealth, exclusivity, and prestige. This blending of geography with economy creates layers of value. The coastline as a hub for both commerce and lifestyle. Yet wealth is not distributed evenly. Coastal cities are often places of stark contrasts. For example, Mumbai, India's great coastal metropolis, contains both luxury skyscrapers overlooking the Arabian Sea and sprawling, informal settlements built precariously close to the water. The coastline here becomes a place where global finance, Bollywood, glamour, and deep social challenges coexist side by side. The same is true in Rio de Janeiro, where beaches like Copacabana and Ipanema sparkle with tourism dollars, even as nearby communities face inequality. Coastal trade also carries risks. Ports, while vital, are vulnerable to disruption. Pirates in the Gulf of Aden, storms in the Pacific, or political disputes in choke points like the Strait of Hormuz can destabilize global supply chains. Coastal economies must balance opportunity with resilience. Technology, from GPS tracking to AI-powered logistics, helps reduce risks, but geography always has the final say. Despite these vulnerabilities, coastlines remain central to global prosperity. The simple fact that 40% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of a coastline demonstrates how deeply humanity relies on them. Coastlines are magnets for growth because they provide food, transportation, and economic opportunity. From luxury real estate to bustling shipping lanes, coastlines continue to shape civilizations as powerfully as they did thousands of years ago. And so, when we think of coastlines as gateways of trade and wealth, we see more than geography. We see the story of human ambition, of merchants and explorers, of empires and corporations, of luxury seekers and workers, all drawn to the eternal rhythm of the shore. The coastline, in this sense, is not only a physical boundary, but also a stage upon which the great play of human history unfolds. When we think of coastlines, it is easy to picture the shining lights of port cities or the golden sands of tourist beaches. Yet beneath the surface, coastlines are also some of the most fragile ecosystems on Earth. These narrow margins between land and sea host mangroves, coral reefs, salt marshes, and estuaries, environments rich with biodiversity, yet vulnerable to disruption. Their fragility teaches us that while coastlines can sustain human wealth and culture, they also demand careful stewardship. Take coral reefs, for example, often called the rainforests of the sea. They grow along tropical coastlines in delicate harmony with light, temperature, and ocean chemistry. In places like the Great Barrier Reef in Australia or the reefs surrounding the Maldives, these underwater gardens provide not only breathtaking beauty, but also practical benefits. They serve as natural barriers against waves, shielding coastal communities from storms and erosion. They also sustain fisheries that feed millions of people worldwide. And yet, despite their importance, coral reefs are vanishing at an alarming rate due to rising sea temperatures, acidification, and destructive practices. In losing them, we risk destabilizing both ecosystems and economies tied to tourism and seafood. Mangroves tell another story of resilience and fragility. These unique coastal forests, with their tangled roots submerged in salt water, thrive in areas like Southeast Asia, West Africa, and the Caribbean. Mangroves protect coastlines from erosion, trap carbon at levels rivaling even rainforests, and provide nurseries for countless marine species. Villagers in Bangladesh rely on them for storm protection, while fishermen in Florida depend on them for sustainable catches. Yet, global development pressures have caused widespread clearing of mangroves for shrimp farms, resorts, and urban expansion. The irony is striking. By removing these natural defenses, communities make themselves more vulnerable to the very storms and flooding that mangroves once softened. Salt marshes and estuaries, too, play a vital role. These low-lying coastal wetlands filter water, absorb excess nutrients, and act as buffers against storm surges. In places like the Thames estuary near London or the Chesapeake Bay in the United States, they are essential for maintaining both natural balance and human activity. But like mangroves, they are shrinking under the combined pressures of urbanization and climate change. Each lost hectare reduces the coastline's capacity to protect itself and its people. Fragility also extends to coastal wildlife. Many migratory species, from sea turtles to seabirds, rely on coastlines as resting, nesting, and feeding grounds. Each year, leatherback turtles return to the same beaches to lay eggs, guided by instincts thousands of years old. Shorebirds, like the red, not make epic migrations from the Arctic to South America, pausing at coastal mudflats to refuel. If coastlines vanish under erosion, rising seas, or pollution, these ancient cycles may be broken. Humans have long benefited from these ecosystems, often without realizing the full extent of the services they provide. Coastal wetlands, reefs, and forests act as natural infrastructure, offering protection that would cost billions to replicate with artificial defenses. Yet, in many regions, protective seawalls or concrete structures are built in place of nature, only to create long-term problems. Seawalls can sometimes accelerate erosion by redirecting wave energy, whereas mangroves and reefs adapt and grow with a changing sea. The fragility of coastal ecosystems is now magnified by climate change. Rising sea levels threaten to drown wetlands. Stronger storms batter coral reefs and shorelines. Warmer waters disrupt the delicate symbiosis of reef organisms, causing bleaching and collapse. For low-lying nations like the Maldives, Tuvalu, or Kiribati, the fragility of coastlines translates into a looming existential crisis. If seas rise high enough, entire cultures could be forced to migrate, leaving behind ancestral homelands swallowed by the ocean. Despite these challenges, there are also stories of hope. Communities across the globe are recognizing the value of restoring coastlines rather than replacing them with concrete. Projects in places like Indonesia and Kenya are replanting mangroves, not only to bring back biodiversity, but also to protect villages from tsunamis and cyclones. Artificial reef structures are being deployed in Florida and the Philippines to give coral polyps a chance to regrow. In the Netherlands, engineers have pioneered soft engineering approaches, using sand dunes, wetlands, and natural barriers to work with coastal ecosystems rather than against them. The fragility of coastlines is also inspiring a new wave of tourism centered on conservation. Visitors to the islands, for example, are not only enchanted by the wildlife, but also educated on the importance of preserving such fragile coastal environments. In this way, tourism becomes both an economic driver and an educational force, linking culture, luxury, and sustainability in one experience. To reflect on coastal fragility is to recognize a paradox. Coastlines are strong enough to sustain civilizations, yet delicate enough to unravel with human carelessness. They are both resilient, surviving countless storms and centuries of human use, and vulnerable, sensitive to even small changes in temperature or pollution. This dual nature makes them a profound symbol of our relationship with the planet. As you imagine these ecosystems, the colorful reefs, the whispering mangroves, the salt marshes alive with birdsong, consider how much they hold together for humanity. They stabilize economies, nourish communities, and cushion us against the power of the sea. But they also remind us that wealth and survival depend not just on taking from the coast, but on nurturing it. The fragility of coastlines may be their most powerful lesson, that what sustains us must also be sustained in return. As waves lap against shorelines across the world, they carry with them stories of human ambition, trade, and settlement. Few features of geography have shaped civilization as much as the coast, and nowhere is this clearer than in the rise of legendary port cities. These urban hubs, cradled by the sea, have not only served as gateways to commerce, but also as melting pots of culture, innovation, and wealth. In exploring them, we uncover the intertwined history of coastlines and civilization itself. Think of Alexandria in Egypt, founded by Alexander the Great in 331 BCE. It was designed to be a link between the Mediterranean and the riches of the Nile. Alexandria's coastal position made it a hub of maritime trade. While its great lighthouse, one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, guided ships safely into harbor. More than a commercial center, it became a beacon of learning. Home to the famed Library of Alexandria, where scholars gathered knowledge from across the known world. The coast here was not just a physical boundary, but a cultural bridge. Venice, Italy, tells another story of coastal ingenuity. Built atop islands and canals in the Venetian lagoon, this city turned its watery challenges into strengths. During the Middle Ages, Venice rose to prominence as a maritime republic, controlling trade routes between Europe and the East. Its wealth, drawn from luxury goods like spices and silk, funded breathtaking art and architecture that still captivates visitors today. Venice's coastal identity was not merely economic. It became a symbol of elegance, power, and cultural exchange. Half a world away, in the Indian Ocean, the city of Zanzibar reflects a similar blending of coast and culture. Known as the Spice Island, Zanzibar thrived as a coastal trading hub between Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Its narrow stone streets and ornate doors tell of centuries of Swahili, Arab, Persian, and Indian influences, all drawn together by the rhythms of the sea. Tourists today come to admire its beaches, but beneath the luxury resorts lies a story of a coast that has connected continents for centuries. Further east, the rise of Hong Kong epitomizes the marriage of coastal geography and global commerce. Perched on the South China Sea, Hong Kong leveraged its deep natural harbor to become one of the busiest ports in the world. Today, it remains a financial and cultural powerhouse. Linking east and west, its skyline, illuminated at night, reflects not just economic might, but also the legacy of a coastline that offered safe anchorage and strategic advantage. And yet, not all coastal cities are about wealth and trade alone. Rio de Janeiro in Brazil is often celebrated for its natural beauty, framed by mountains and beaches. Its coastline, with famous stretches like Copacabana and Ipanema, helped shape Brazil's global identity as a land of vibrancy and rhythm. Tourism thrives here, blending luxury with the natural wonders of the shore. But Rio's coastal geography has also shaped its challenges with vulnerability to rising seas and storms. In northern Europe, Amsterdam grew from reclaimed coastal wetlands where canals provided defense and transportation. Today, it remains a symbol of Dutch mastery over water. Similarly, Singapore, a small island city-state, rose from a fishing village to a global hub of trade and technology. Its strategic coastal location at the crossroads of shipping lanes made it indispensable for maritime commerce. In just a few generations, Singapore transformed into a model of efficiency, luxury, and urban planning, proving once again that the coast remains a foundation for global influence. Legendary coastal cities also carry stories of resilience. New Orleans, in the United States, embodies this spirit. Nestled by the Mississippi River and the Gulf of Mexico, it has long been a cultural crossroads, blending French, African, and Caribbean influences. Its music, cuisine, and festivals are inseparable from its coastal setting. But New Orleans is also a reminder of fragility. having endured hurricanes and flooding that reveal the risks of building on the edge of land and sea. What connects all these cities? Alexandria, Venice, Zanzibar, Hong Kong, Rio, Amsterdam, Singapore. New Orleans is their shared reliance on coastlines as lifelines. The coast gave them access to resources, trade, and cultural exchange. But it also demanded adaptation, engineering against tides, resilience in the face of storms, and creativity to turn challenges into opportunity. Today, many of these coastal cities are leading not only in culture and economy, but also in innovation. Venice experiments with barriers to hold back rising seas. Singapore develops floating infrastructure to adapt to climate change. Amsterdam continues its centuries-old mastery of water management, balancing urban growth with sustainability. The coast continues to inspire both necessity and brilliance. In reflecting on these legendary ports, we see more than just harbors or skylines. We see how coastlines have shaped human destiny. They have offered wealth and luxury, connection and culture, but also risk and vulnerability. To study these cities is to understand that the story of civilization is inseparable from the story of the coast. As you drift deeper into thought, imagine the glow of lanterns along Venice's canals, the roar of waves at Rio's beaches, or the call of merchants in Zanzibar's harbor. Each sound, each image tells of humanity's timeless relationship with the shore. The coast, in all its variety, remains both the stage and the script for a shared story. As we near the close of our journey, let us turn our gaze from cities and trade toward the quiet marvels of nature along the coast. For while ports and civilizations rise and fall, the ecosystems of the shoreline remain timeless, nurturing life in ways both visible and unseen. Coastal ecosystems are often called the nurseries of the sea, delicate yet powerful in their ability to sustain biodiversity, protect communities, and regulate the planet's climate. Begin with mangroves, those strange forests where trees grow with their roots in salt water. Their tangled roots form natural fortresses, breaking the force of waves and shielding inland areas from storms. But beyond their protective role, mangroves are teeming with life. Fish, crabs, and birds find shelter here. In fact, many species of commercial fish that humans rely upon spend their juvenile years hidden among the roots of mangroves before venturing into the open sea. This makes mangroves not just guardians of coastlines, but also foundations of coastal economies. Coral reefs, often called the rainforests of the sea, are another marvel. Built by tiny coral polyps over millennia, these reefs are home to a quarter of all marine species. Their vibrant colors, shaped by symbiotic algae, dazzle divers and tourists. Yet reefs serve more than beauty. They buffer coastlines from waves, support fishing industries, and draw travelers from across the globe, fueling tourism economies. The Great Barrier Reef of Australia, stretching over 2,300 kilometers, is the largest coral system in the world and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It represents both the fragility and the majesty of coastal ecosystems, threatened by warming seas, yet endlessly inspiring in its scale. Salt marshes are perhaps less glamorous, but no less important. Found in temperate regions, these wetlands act as natural filters, absorbing pollutants and storing carbon. They are havens for migratory birds whose long journeys rely on the rich feeding grounds provided by tidal marshes. To walk across a salt marsh is to step into a world where land and sea blend seamlessly, where the tides breathe life in and out like a heartbeat. Seagrass, meadows, swaying gently beneath shallow waters, also play an unsung role in coastal health. Like forests on land, seagrasses capture carbon, stabilize sediments, and provide shelter for countless species. In regions like the Mediterranean, seagrass meadows have survived for thousands of years, forming some of the oldest living organisms on Earth. They are quiet ecosystems, hidden from casual view, yet vital for the balance of marine life. And then there are tidal flats, vast expanses of sand and mud revealed when the tide recedes. At first glance, they may seem barren, but they are alive with worms, clams, and crabs, feeding millions of migratory birds that stop here on their global journeys. The Wadden Sea of northern Europe is one such tidal flat, stretching across Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands. It is both a natural wonder and a cultural landscape, where humans have coexisted with the rhythms of the tide for centuries. Beyond ecosystems themselves, coastlines also shape the migratory paths of species. Whales, for instance, often hug continental shelves during their great migrations, finding rich feeding grounds near coastal upwellings. Sea turtles return, year after year, to the very beaches where they were born, laying eggs in the sand as they have for millions of years. Shorebirds trace coastlines as if guided by invisible maps, traveling from the Arctic to the tropics with remarkable precision. These migrations are reminders that coasts are not static boundaries, but dynamic corridors of life. The human connection to coastal ecosystems runs deep as well. Coastal fisheries sustain millions of livelihoods, while ecotourism brings travelers seeking both relaxation and education. Luxury resorts may rise along coral-fringed beaches, but behind the leisure lies a natural system that supports local communities and global biodiversity alike. To lose these ecosystems would be to lose more than beauty. It would be to unravel the intricate web that sustains both nature and human society. And yet, like so much along the coast, these ecosystems face threats. Rising seas, warming waters, and human development place them at risk. Mangroves are cut for timber or cleared for shrimp farms. Coral reefs bleach under high temperatures. Salt marshes are drained for agriculture, while seagrass meadows are scarred by boat anchors. Around the world, communities are restoring mangroves, protecting reefs, and replanting seagrasses. In places like the Philippines, Kenya, and the Caribbean, local efforts to restore coastal ecosystems are proving that recovery is possible when humans work with, rather than against, the rhythms of the sea. In many ways, these ecosystems embody the dual essence of coastlines: fragile yet enduring, vulnerable yet powerful. They remind us that coastlines are not merely edges of land, but living systems that support the balance of the earth itself. As you reflect on these wonders, imagine drifting through a mangrove channel at dusk, the air alive with the calls of birds. Picture swimming above a coral reef where fish of every color flicker like living jewels. Envision a salt marsh at sunrise, the mist rising as birds take flight. These are the quiet wonders of the coast's ecosystems that whisper their importance with every tide. To understand coastlines fully, we must listen not only to the roar of waves or the bustle of ports, but also to the soft hum of these ecosystems, the hidden lifelines of the shore. And as we continue this journey, we step from the natural back into the human story, to the future of coastlines, and how we might preserve them for generations to come. As our long journey comes to its final chapter, let us step softly into the future. We have traveled across sandy beaches, through bustling ports, into ecosystems of mangroves and coral, and along cities shaped by the rhythm of the tide. And now, we stand at the edge of tomorrow, where coastlines face new challenges, but also new opportunities. One of the greatest forces shaping coastlines in the future is climate change. Rising sea levels are not abstract ideas, but measured realities. Each year, millimeters of seawater creep higher, and though the number seems small, the effect is immense. Low-lying islands in the Pacific, like Kiribati and Tuvalu, already face the prospect of losing land entirely to the sea. Coastal megacities, from Jakarta to Miami, are building defenses, raising walls, or even planning the relocation of entire neighborhoods. For millions of people, the shoreline is shifting, reminding us that coastlines are never fixed. But coastlines are not only sites of vulnerability, they are also centers of innovation. Engineers and planners are rethinking how to live with the sea rather than against it. Floating houses, amphibious architecture, and elevated infrastructure are being designed in countries like the Netherlands, where centuries of experience in managing water have led to creative solutions. Rather than only building walls to hold the ocean back, some communities are experimenting with ways to let the tide in, creating wetlands that both protect against floods and restore natural ecosystems. Tourism, too, will evolve. The allure of coastlines as places of luxury, travel, and culture will not fade, but it will adapt. Ecotourism, where visitors learn about mangroves, coral reefs, and marine conservation, is growing. Resorts are now investing in reef restoration, not only to protect the environment, but to sustain the beauty that draws travelers from around the world. Along coastlines, tourism and education are blending, creating experiences where relaxation and learning go hand in hand. Economically, ports will remain the lifelines of global trade, but they, too, face transformation. As technology advances, smart ports are emerging, powered by artificial intelligence, automation, and green energy. Ships are shifting toward cleaner fuels, and coastal infrastructure is being reimagined to reduce emissions. The future coastline is one where commerce, technology, and environmental responsibility may align more closely than ever before. There is also the story of energy. Coastlines will increasingly serve as sites of renewable power. Offshore wind farms, already rising in the North Sea, generate vast amounts of clean energy. Tidal and wave energy, still in experimental stages, hold promise for harnessing the perpetual motion of the sea. Coastal regions may soon become not just places where energy arrives, but where it is created. A transition that could reshape economies and reduce dependence on fossil fuels. Yet, beyond technology and economy, the heart of the coastline lies in culture and memory. Coastal communities hold centuries of traditions tied to the sea. From fishing methods passed down through generations to songs, festivals, and myths shaped by the waves. In Japan, the Shinto belief in the sacredness of natural features often extends to coastal rocks and islands. In the Pacific, Polynesian navigators used the stars, winds, and currents to sail across vast distances, guided by intimate knowledge of the ocean. These traditions are not relics, but living parts of human identity. As the future unfolds, preserving them may be as important as preserving the land itself. Education, too, will play a role. To understand coastlines is to understand balance between land and sea, between human ambition and natural limits. Schools and universities are now creating entire programs dedicated to coastal studies, where students learn not only geography and science, but also economics, policy, and culture. This interdisciplinary approach mirrors the complexity of coastlines themselves, places where every force, natural and human, converges. And perhaps the most profound future of coastlines lies in their role as teachers of humility. Standing at the shore, we are reminded that the earth is larger than us, that the waves have rolled long before humans walked these beaches, and that they will continue long after. Coastlines teach us patience, resilience, and respect. They remind us that even as we build, trade, and travel, we remain part of a greater system, one shaped by tides, winds, and the endless horizon. As we close this long journey together, imagine yourself once more on a coastline of your choosing. Perhaps it is a quiet beach where waves whisper against the sand. Perhaps it is a harbor alive with the lights of ships returning home. Perhaps it is a wild cliffside where the sea crashes with untamed force. Wherever it may be, feel the presence of the shore, timeless, ever-changing, and deeply connected to life itself. Thank you for joining this exploration of 30 coastline facts woven into the history, culture, nature. If you found peace and curiosity in this journey, remember you are always welcome back. Whether to learn, to relax, or simply to drift off with the sound of words like waves upon the sand. Good night, and may the tide of knowledge carry you gently into rest.